Great. Thanks for coming to this showing, and thanks to the lovely Cal staff for showing this important film. My name is Adam Webb. I'm the president of the Arkansas Library Association. I'm a practicing librarian here in the state, and joining me up on the stage today are LaToya Morgan, a school librarian here in Little Rock, Ann Knight, an author with Authors Against Book Bans, and attorney John Williams. So please join me in welcoming our panel. So I figured I would ask some questions of our panelists here, about 15 minutes, and then give us some time for a Q&A, if that sounds good to everybody. First up, I have a question for LaToya. From your perspective, what has changed most in school libraries over the past few years when it comes to book challenges or restrictions?
I will say personally, I have not seen a huge change besides the laws that have been put in place over a couple of last legislative sessions. But I do feel like there is a fear that exists. So I can't speak for other librarians, but I can speak for myself. I don't care what they tell me to remove. If my kids want to read it, or my children want to read it, I purchase it. I'm not grooming anyone. I know what I'm not doing. And so that part really doesn't affect me, but I do know that there are librarians across this state that don't have that same story and have not had that same experience. So across this state, there are places across this state that are much like some of the locations on this movie that we just saw. And there are librarians across this state that have been threatened. There are librarians across this state that have faced, the name calling, just almost, they're almost deeming us as inhuman in my opinion, when we take care of children. But personally, that has not been my experience, but I will tell everybody in this room that it is happening, and because of the laws that have been passed in the last legislative session, educators across this state are fearful. And we need other people to speak for us, because some of us are fearful for our jobs.
I think it's a very important point to make about needing people to speak for us. A question for Ann. As an author, how does it feel to see books challenged or removed, especially when they're written for young people?
I would say it's heartbreaking, really, for so many angles. Authors, we pour little pieces of ourselves in each book we write, and we primarily, our first audience is ourselves. We write the book that we want to read or we need to read. And authors who write for children, middle grade, young adult, they're writing for what they needed back when they were children themselves. As we saw in the film, what they needed to get through difficult experiences. And so no author wants to hear, your words don't matter, be quiet, you will be silenced. Because we pour so much intention into all of our words. So it's very heartbreaking to see, authors be told to be silent and go away. It's more heartbreaking to see the consequences for kids who need these words to get through, to learn. It's infuriating to see librarians take the brunt of this when, authors are right here and are a part of this fight too. So it's a lot.
Got one for you here, John. The Arkansas Constitution states, "The liberty of the press shall forever remain inviolate. The free communication of thoughts and opinions are one of the invaluable rights of man." From a legal standpoint, how do you reconcile that statement with recent legislation that the state has passed?
Yeah, I don't know that you do. I mean, and we under the ACLU, we've challenged a number of the laws that attempt to censor books that are in schools, that are in libraries. Our cases have taken on laws like Act 372, which has a provision that would criminalize librarians for allowing certain materials. And I mean, a lot of these laws, besides I think violating the First Amendment, are also overly vague. They don't really give librarians standards for what is supposed to be prohibited, or they sort of voice some sort of general objection, like we see in a film like this, to LGBTQ or books involving Black characters that don't really have good standards for determining how something should be regulated. So you don't. I think the answer to your question is it's really not easy to reconcile.
I think Act 372 simply used the word appropriate.
Right. So
no definition.
Right. So someone could challenge a book because they found it inappropriate, which brings any number of books into the area of challenge.
While I got you here, when does a book challenge cross the line into unconstitutional censorship?
Yeah, so you saw a reference in the movie to this case Pico. I mean, that talks about viewpoint discrimination. So if a book is being challenged because the government does not agree with the viewpoint that it takes, that's a constitutional problem. So, and we've seen cases here in Arkansas where this is the case. There was a case up in Crawford County where the library had created a social section, sort of like the social section, a section where they put LGBTQ related books and gave it that euphemism. The lawyers there challenged that as a viewpoint discrimination. Those books were selected for special treatment because of the viewpoints they express. So that's a problem. But this is, it's been going on for a long time. I mean, 2003, there were librarians who tried to ban Harry Potter. You can probably remember that. And that was, again, there was no reason to ban those books besides the viewpoint, or people disagreeing with the viewpoint that was in those books. So that's kind of the triggering question when you're looking at what, why a book is being removed from libraries. Is it because of the viewpoint it expresses, instead of something like, is it too old, or is it not checked out, something like that?
LaToya, could you maybe walk the audience through what typically happens when a book is challenged in a school setting?
So typically in a school setting, first of all, we all have policies in our own respective school districts. This is state law. So we all already have this challenging policy, and so the book will be pulled, and then the people like on the board or whoever's reviewing the book will have to all read the book, and then you'll have a meeting, and then you'll have to agree that this book needs to be removed. That's typically how it happens. And so a parent will typically be the person to bring that matter up. I've been a librarian now for 13 years, and I've never had a challenge book in the history of me being a librarian.
One of the things that's been keeping me up at night is some of the reporting I've seen in the state of schools that aren't following those policies, that are just saying, well, take those 50 books off the ebook platform, or get rid of the mixed up files of Miss Baisley Frankweiler, which didn't even go through a challenge process at all from the reporting. So are you hearing any of that from your colleagues around the state?
Well, yeah, actually, I reached out to the superintendent in North Little Rock School District when they were banning Epic Books, which is a digital platform that's available. And so I called him and I said, so how did you know what kids read what books? He waited, and he did respond, and he said, well, actually we don't know that. I said, so you just banned books because somebody didn't like it or didn't agree with the viewpoint? Basically, I said, well, how can you assure that every teacher did that? You can't, because they all have their own accounts. So do you not think that a parent is not reviewing what their own children are reading on Epic? We're talking about Epic, but we're not talking about the cell phone, Google?
Right.
I don't know.
Down to you, Ann. What misconceptions do you think fuel this book ban movement, and how can communities address them constructively?
Well, I think kind of like the film mentioned, there's this misconception about this being pornographic or sexually explicit material in libraries or schools. And, you know, it's just really not the case. A lot of these claims are, you know, grossly exaggerated. You know, for example, the children's book by Shannon Hale is about a unicorn, a boy unicorn, because she has several sons, and she wanted there to be a boy unicorn in books. For representation. And the unicorn has purple hair and thick eyelashes. And through the book, the unicorn sits down in a puddle of paint. And so it was challenged in Texas for promoting gender confusion and for like bringing undue attention to the genital region. So that's an example of children's books. And then, you know, in young adults, you know, sometimes there are more mature themes because we're dealing with teenagers, right? One book that gets challenged frequently is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And a lot of times things are taken completely out of context. You know, the reason that that's often challenged is the kids in the books, the characters, they see some sexual abuse and they're very disturbed by it, right? And so this is often brought up as a reason to ban this book. But if you turn the page, it shows these children being very upset and going to a trusted adult for help on how to deal with this, right? And so the message of the book is very important. And I think we, as parents, as community members, as authors and librarians, like, we need to remember that books are a safe place to prepare our children for an unsafe world. And that just cannot be forgotten. And I think another misconception is that this will stop in school libraries. You know, the rallying cry is we've got to protect our kids, we've got to take care of our children. Well, everyone wants to take care of, you know, I'm a parent, I want to take care of my children too. But it's a complete falsehood to believe that this will end at the school libraries. It will, you know, Act 372, you know, was more public libraries. Right now, there's a proposed ban in the Arkansas Department of Corrections, trying to like prohibit any print materials, paperbacks, magazines, whatever, for like the imprisoned persons inside, and then limit them to a very limited selection on like ebooks and tablets. And you know, and then once you can also see the argument of, oh, well, we don't even let imprisoned people read these books, and they're in our school libraries. We can't let our children read anything that we wouldn't even let imprisoned people read. And then, you know, there's been proposed bills in Oklahoma that would affect manga and graphic novels and romance novels, and it will, you know, it will just continue to grow. It won't stop with children or any population that can easily be ignored. It would eventually come for all of us.
I think that's an important point to bring up too. Whenever we talk about Act 372, we tend to talk about the library impact, but it actually affected the commercial sale of books as well. So it would have affected commercial booksellers, which is why Wordsworth Books and Pearl's Books are both plaintiffs in that case as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about Act 372 and where it is right now? Maybe for the folks here.
Yeah, sure. So the federal district court, the lower court, the trial court in Fayetteville issued an injunction against the law, saying it couldn't be enforced, or at least parts of it. The parts that said that the public libraries have to remove certain books into a sort of adults-only section, and the parts allowing anyone to challenge books because they were inappropriate. So that's on appeal right now. The appeal is briefed. It's before the 8th Circuit. The 8th Circuit is moving sort of slow on it. So the law remains not in effect while the appeal goes on. But at some point, the 8th Circuit will decide that appeal, and we'll get a ruling from that court on it.
I think I'll have one more for LaToya and one more for Ann, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. LaToya, what do you wish more parents or community members understood about how librarians select books?
Okay, so there's this notion that I guess I was just hired off the street. And I'm not an educator. That's the other part. I paid a lot of money for my degree. Okay? And also while doing that, I took classes that helped me prepare for this role, like collection development. I'm gonna say any Joe Blow off the street that's just putting books in the library. I'm actually asking your students and your kids, what do they like? That is how I build my collection. I also have a vendor that comes in and does an analysis of the books in my collection to remove old books that are not being used, to assess what I need. Like I'm a real person that's a real professional in a real school that educates real children with real problems as early as kindergarten. So when I had the student at my school whose parent was murdered, I have a book in my library called The Goodbye Fish. Another little boy had another family member that was murdered. They got together, and this is what people don't see. When Miss Morgan told me about this book, I looked over, and they were all in a corner, and I have a little corner where they read, and they were reading the book together. That's what books do for children. And also, I would like for parents to come to the school, ask questions, stop by, take your kid to the library, to the public library, to the school library, and check out a book. Have conversations with your children, because that's not happening. Because when you do that, you will realize how special the library really is. So like on this video, it's a safe haven for so many kids. And I make sure that I curate that every single day. I'm intentional about that. Kids have came out to me, oh, Miss Morgan, I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know what you want me to say, but okay, yeah, I'm still there. Come on back. You know, so it's that space, so we have to make sure that we keep that safe space in all of our schools, and we have to also make sure that libraries remain libraries. And we don't allow legislators to take over.
Last question here, and this dovetails in great with what LaToya just said. Many of the challenge books address themes of race, gender, history, or identity. Why do you think those stories in particular are the ones that are most often targeted?
That's a big question. I would say primarily two reasons. One would be fear of the unknown, which is why we read, to learn and take care of that fear. You know, it can be, if you don't know the history or you don't know another person's perspective, right? It can feel alarming or threatening. Books provide a way to show us our own humanity and show us other people's humanity as well. It promotes empathy, and really the answer to fear of the unknown is to pick up a book. The other thing with the desire to control, that's harder. I mean, what I would say to someone is, well, we live in the United States. We have the First Amendment. I have freedom of expression. You don't get to silence me. You don't get to silence the other people around me or like take books out of my hands. And you're gonna have to live with other people having a different viewpoint than you.
Well said. We have microphones on both sides of the aisle here if you have any questions for any of our panelists. If not, I'm going to take a minute to plug the Arkansas Library Association's Intellectual Freedom Helpline. So if you know anybody who's experiencing censorship issues in their school library, public library, any other type of library, if you go to the Arkansas Library Association website, there's a link at the top left where you can fill out an anonymous reporting form and we can get you some help. Yes, right here in front.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I would like to see one new requirement of every parent that wants to ban a book, and that is for them to submit a passing grade book report. I think that'll cut down on a lot of the mindless demands that we see. How pervasive are the holdings of a library like Cal's? If you compared Cal's holdings to the Krause list, for example.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not an employee of Cal's.
We can get that answer for you. Ellen, do you know?
I mean, we had most of them. I would be able to.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a similar list that got sort of passed around in the state from the State Library Board, and when we did the checking, we had those.
Yeah, are you talking about the Raybert list? Yeah.
How was Garland County?
We had all of them.
Can you repeat that?
When Jason Raybert was still on the State Library Board, he had a list of about 30 books that he wanted to find out if any public libraries in the state had them. And I think Cal's had all of them. We had all of them. Most of the larger libraries did. They were well-reviewed, award-winning books by and large. Books that dealt with some difficult topics, sure, but nothing that a public library of a certain size shouldn't shy away from.
One last thought. I can remember when I was a young person, I received, the conservative upbringing. I felt like my values were where they needed to be, but that didn't mean I didn't put them to the test. And all I can say is if I was a kid today, seeing a list of banned books, that'd be the first book I want to find. So I don't think the people that are taking this away even understand kids. Last thing I'll say is we have some collections on the internet. I'm thinking of the archive.org in particular, where a lot of books are available in a digital format. And I wonder if, as kind of a counter measure against these Krause lists, if all of those banned books could be digitized and put up there, just so that they don't disappear.
There are some initiatives out there, particularly New York Public Library and Brooklyn Public Library will put a lot of the most challenged books available online at great expense to themselves, so anybody in the country can check them out. But yeah, that's a great point. Thanks. Thank you. Yes?
School librarian for almost 40 years, and I have experienced a very similar situation that we saw in the film tonight. The one thing that only got touched on here that I would like to mention is that our biggest advocates, when we had 70 books challenged in our collection at the high school, were our students who were most articulate. And we actually published the list that was being challenge, well actually it never went through the challenge policy, but the list they wanted removed. And I can tell you every one of those books got checked out multiple times by our students. And lots of times they would come back and slam the book on the counter and say, I don't understand why they wanted this one gone. There was no sex in this book. So our kids were our biggest advocates, and they actually, I think the pressure that they put on our administration and the fact that our lawyer told our school district would be sued and it would cost them a lot of money because they'd lose were the two reasons that our school board decided to keep those books on the shelves. So there are other ways to fight this, and if you follow the challenge policy, which requires that you have to purchase copies of the book so that everyone on the challenge committee has the opportunity to see it, and if you read it, and if you multiply that by 70 titles, that's a lot of money that the district has to invest. And so there are ways to kind of fight back. I will also say that the thing that came to me, my epiphany during that time, was that parents were trying to parent every child in our district and not just their own. And we had a parent group that was offended by that because they felt their children should have access to sex education so that they could be safe. They felt that knowing about the lifestyles of other people was important if we were going to be able to get along in the world. And so those are things that I learned from that. That's leading me to a question now, which is that in addition to Act 372, we now have another act which requires in K-5 that any book that's considered harmful to minors should be put in a locked compartment of some kind. And so what I'm hearing is that administrators are going in and pulling books off the shelf and putting them there without actually going through the challenge policy. And I've been told that they don't have to do that. They have the right to just remove those books. So I would like to ask John if in that case, Act 372, especially anything that applies to school libraries, is still in effect. So wouldn't those books have to go through the challenge policy before they're just removed from the shelves?
I don't know the specific answer to that question. I will say that I think that act exhibits some of the problems I was talking about earlier with vagueness. I mean, I think it's harmful for minors is a legal term of art, but as I understand that law, it's not just that sort of legal term of art. It's sort of anything that really has to do with any sort of sexual material, which can include, I mean, it can mean really kind of like anything. And if someone takes sort of a prudish offense to it, then that can go into a locked container. And so there's really no standard for determining what book should be taken away from a child, and it can allow someone to just take something away because they disagree with the views it expresses. So that's my understanding of that law. And it doesn't intersect exactly with Act 372, but there's certainly some overlap in the issues and the problems there.
Right. And I will tell you that I have talked to a school librarian